to WellPlayed VHS, WellPlayed's film and movie podcast. We're here discussing The Last of Us Episode 3 in our The Last of Us recap. I'm Zach Jackson. I am joined by James Wood.
Hello.
Nathan Hennessy.
Welcome back.
And once again, Radio Watson's Buddy Watson.
How are we all?
Amazing.
Does anyone have any tissues left in their household after watching the latest episode?
Well,
we're off to the races tonight.
Yeah. What do I say to that?
all right,
Tissues are
Nathan.
good, thank you.
Nathan, Buddy, you two have watched it recently, I assume in the last 24 hours. Wait, yeah, because it can't, yeah. And James, you have not seen it since you did the review, and neither have I.
Not since the review.
Yeah. All right, Nathan, how did you feel about episode 3?
So I was a little bit conflicted by it. I liked the intent of where it was going, particularly, the big sort of middle act that we're treated to that's going to be, I guess, probably most of today's discussion. I really wasn't thrilled with it's a longer episode, right? Like this episode clocks in just shy of, I think it's an hour and a half? I don't know, hour 15?
I thought it was like 75 minutes or something like that.
75 minutes is probably about right. You're probably about right there, but that's still on the longer end of the scale.
Yeah,
so it's HBO doing that kind of thing. But the thing is it starts off pretty slow, I thought. Really didn't care much for the intro. It reminded me a lot of The Walking Dead in terms of what I consider to be pretty vapid dialogue and some prestige shots that kind of just tick some boxes but also weren't that interesting. So yeah, I don't know. I see a lot of potential in this episode. I was a little bit bummed out that it didn't quite reach what it was setting up. Okay. For me, we'll discuss further.
Buddy, how about you? How'd you find episode 3?
I loved it. Thought it was fantastic. Loved pretty much everything about it. And it was... Are we speaking spoilers now or no?
Yeah, you can do whatever.
Yeah, so one thing I thought was a bit weird, like they didn't do the cold open like they did in the first 2 episodes, which was so powerful. But then obviously the whole reason for it is because the whole episode is basically flashbacks. So I thought that was a good move in hindsight. Was basically turning that opening cold call into kind of one massive episode, and the way they fleshed out Bill and Frank and everything that was fantastic. And kind of that moment towards the end where kind of Joel feels a little bit more responsibility towards maybe Ellie, or kind of obligation based on that thing. So I really liked it.
Nice. James, now you did the review for us. Where did this episode sit in the 9 eps for you?
I think my review's not alone in paying special attention to this one. I think that it is by and large... I guess the most traditionally successful episode of this show, and I think that that's simultaneously a bit of a yardstick measurement for me of where the rest of this show ends up, and sort of the kind of quality. If this is kind of the best it's got to offer, I think that says both something about this episode and what the rest of it does have to offer. I do think it is somewhat successful in its queer storytelling. And I noted this in the review as well. There's an intimacy to it here that I really appreciated, especially as a queer person. There's some good stuff in here. There's also some stuff I'm not super jazzed about. I think that the like Nathan said, like the kind of the visual language, the prestige language of this one is when we really start getting into like it's so staged.
Yes.
I don't feel any real texture from a lot of this world at this point. And I think that is alienating as a viewer. But look, yeah, it's got some good, it's got some less good. I understand why it's getting sort of this major sort of like critical and popular response that it's getting, because I think it is an effective bit of emotional storytelling. But I think as a queer story, I have some more deeper concerns, I guess. And it's, I don't know, a bit all over the place on this one.
So at the request of Ben Smith, I did listen to the podcast with Troy Baker, Craig Mazin, I can't remember what I think it was Mazin that we said, and Big Nearly. And they kind of do talk about some of the choices that they make and whatnot in this. But it's clearly a big departure from this part of the game. Like it's very, very different. Buddy, how did you feel? I know that you said that you enjoyed the episode, but the changes that they made, because it is such a big change.
I thought it was fine. Like one of the big things you get in the game is the banter between Ellie and Bill. I think that's kind of like the biggest relationship outside of like the kind of hinted at moments of Bill's past or current life and how he got into that position versus what you get in this game. In the TV show. And I loved all the Sarah stuff in episode 1, how they kind of flashbacked and kind of had her going into the city and actual, getting Joel the watch and the origins of that and the whole neighbor interactions and that little moments you get with Sarah and Joel back and forth of who's going to go over to the neighbor's house, and that kind of fleshed out that situation versus where in the game you just wake up and chaos is happening, and because you have that agency you already kind of had that care for her versus you don't have that watching the show. So I think the same way they did that with Bill and Frank, even though they're not kind of maybe to a viewer that hasn't watched the game like mainstream characters, like this is a one-off thing, but it's a story that's in this world. Maybe people don't see it as important or why we're seeing this versus kind of Ellie and Joel's, like people would maybe describe it as filler episodes, but from someone who played the game, I love seeing these fleshed out kind of moments and seeing how the characters kind of can have more backstory and nuance, I guess.
Nathan, as someone, you're playing through part 1 now, so you're past this. I think you said that you're past
Well
this
past.
section. Yeah.
Yeah,
How
but
did you
still
find,
recent enough in memory.
How did you find this game to TV show?
I think the first thing I was happy was kind of just getting into the mindset that this is going to be from very early on, this is going to be quite the departure, because we know that I think we're given the impression in the game that there wasn't a great sense of intimacy between Frank and Bill. Both references made, but during and after the fact that we find Bill, the character, hanging in a building after having tried to desert.
It's
Frank. Frank, sorry. Yeah, Frank having tried to desert Bill. That you sense that it was more of a relationship of circumstance rather than something that was deeply intimate. So here we're exploring a more intimate relationship. So, I go into the mindset of this is where the series really demonstrates to me that these characters are a very different version of the characters that were treated to in the series. I've got to look at this as a completely different. Well, I got to read this completely differently as I would someone playing the game. So once I had that kind of mindset, I was all in. It was a quite a fun story to explore with these two characters. As I say, I was a little more, or rather less, thrilled with the episode that we get either side of it, because this is an episode that's bookended by a different story of basically like Joel and Ellie in the present day, and that was detracting for me. I would have much appreciated to just dive straight into that middle story with Bill Frank and just spend time on it. Then that would have made the ending feel a little bit more impactful for me, because the ending is definitely one of the big draws for that story. In terms of being a telling of a fairly traditional romance story, ending in tragedy as it does. That's fairly it's been the ancient commonplace way of telling a love story through tragic lens, and I think it does that well enough. In terms of if it was a theatre play or a stage play, which is also how I spent much of my time watching that chapter of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I really, really like this episode. The only thing I would say is I probably thought it was a little bit too long. Knowing that this is a one and done story kind of thing, I feel like because there are some episodes later on in the series, season, that are a bit short. And I think I might have said this in the thing, but things towards the end kind of do feel a little bit rushed, a little bit. But so I felt like, spending 75 minutes here or whatever it may be, when they could have maybe chopped 15, make it an hour. But other than that, I thought it was really good. So the episode, the end of episode 2. I'm trying to think what happens. I can't remember now. Anyway, Joel.
They
Oh,
leave
sorry.
Tess
Yes,
behind.
yes. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. So Tess is getting a smooch, and then blows up the building. So the beginning of this episode sees. Are they in the mountains at the start here? Or they're going for a hike or something?
Yeah, they're hiking. So
Hiking,
in the
sorry.
bushland.
Yeah. And then it's kind of like, how long's the hike? Like 5 hours or something like that. And then I think that's where they camp. Or is that a bit, yeah. So they go camping, and then they stop at this, what looks like a shop or something, and Joel's buried some stuff there, and that's when Ellie goes into the bunker.
Basement.
Yeah, the basement bunker, and finds that clicker like fused to the wall.
I do want to say I loved this scene with Ellie. I think when she finds that clicker that's kind of like, so it can't move basically.
Yeah.
And initially her reaction is fear, obviously, and then that melts away and she takes out a knife and just like kind of makes an incision into its head to just look at it.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really interesting, quiet moment for a character whose relationship to violence is obviously going to evolve in some really interesting ways. And I enjoyed that moment. I liked there's a bit where she found like the tampons somewhere as well. Like I think you get some really good Ellie stuff in this episode. The joke about Joel not remembering where he put his stash, I thought was very dad-like and very sweet in its own way. Again, like Nathan said, it's nothing revolutionary, but I did enjoy the more quieter characterization moments, and I think that the show could definitely do with more of that.
Yeah. And then it pretty much flashes back to Bill, and he's eating dinner, I think, isn't he? No, sorry,
before that, he's watching Fedra
Yes,
on his doorstep.
Yes. So Fedra's come to this little town, this whatever it is, like a little
Massachusetts
pop-up little village.
Yeah, like a little suburb thing.
And yeah, Fedra's come in and he's hiding in his basement, watching them on his cameras, and they've come into the building, can't find anyone, and everyone's gone. So he's got the entire town to himself and goes and cracks a bottle of wine or something, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He effectively, like he builds himself a small, isolated town. You know,
he
puts up a
thrives.
fence, gets a bunch of fuel and food and generator, and does everything that you're going to need to do to sort of have like a self-sustaining thing. That's making him like a 9/11 truther, kind of vague, fuck the government type in America. I did find to be a really interesting character choice because, like his queerness and his let's say views on America and its systems, I think are potentially competing ideologies, but there is some interesting tension there at least. Like I think the idea of like having this kind of like deeply insular, deeply sort of like paranoid individual eventually learning to express his queerness later on in his life is quite a nice choice. But I also think at the same time, the way that he's coded in this and the kind of like anti-government kind of truther vibe paired with I'd say the way this episode films American iconography and the flag flapping in the sunlight, I think there's a lot of competing things going on here that I don't think gel cohesively for me. But yeah, it's certainly making some choices. Yeah,
even the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. That was
exactly. That's
like
it.
In his bunker, I was like, oh, okay. What kind of person is Bill, or
exactly.
what kind of person is he going to be? And then
it feels like they went with a really shortcut to like Nick Offerman just kind of like plays this vibe really well. And I think that there is a way that you could have done that vibe without the "Don't Tread on Me" bullshit sort of hovering in the background, because as it is for the text itself, like there is no reflection on his ideology, racism, of anything of the sort that's usually associated with sort of like a more, let's say, conservative leaning person.
I had to have a look into it after I kind of saw that flag and I was reading into it. Like that symbol didn't really come like politicized until like the early 2010s. So this set in 2003, I'm like, has that even hit its meaning yet? But still,
Right.
the show has the context of what that flag is about now versus when the show is set. So I'm kind of like, that already have that expectation, but they're offsetting of like this time frame when it might not have been this, conservative, associated with bigotry or racism or type things. So like, what are they? It is like it is kind of off-putting a bit, but
There's also the context of when this was written. Like you can just imagine that this is written sort of early enough within the pandemic that people are getting aware of trends such as like survivalists became popular as a curio for a moment because it's like these people have been preparing for shit like this. Look at them thrive. And then there's always been this, association that it's these nutty wackos that are the survivalists. It kind of plays on that, but it's a hop, skip, and a jump from the "Don't tread on me" American flag to "Damn, survivalists are resourceful, aren't they?" to "He's thriving. We can get around a bloke like this. He's living the quintessential male fantasy. He's gone back to his roots, and damn, he makes it look good." It's all very like you don't see absolutely any hardship to how he adjusts to life as a survivalist. Not once. Like I noticed very particular their shots. Like for example, he builds himself like a little like abattoir. He's got like a little outdoor butcher's shed and stuff like that. Like there's no mess. There's none of that rustic charm. He's just made it work as though it's another step in modernism.
Do you think that comes from being like a closeted gay man that maybe didn't feel a part of that town or scene before, and now it's kind of like a massive exhale outside of all his survival skills and resourcefulness and stuff?
Interesting, because then you see him kind of repressing Frank's ability to do anything with the town as well, like for him to be able to thrive and make his mark on it.
Yeah. Yep.
I had one thought, and I thought like this suburb must be relatively big or somewhat kind of big. How does he fence off the entire fucking thing?
Well,
Don't worry about
it. Was wasn't it? It was like a 3-year time skip when we see that. We're introduced to that fence with 3 years later.
Yeah, but like that's got to be like a
lot of resources.
Yeah, like
What else
But
is
then
there
like
to do,
Joel's
though?
just like he strides in later and is like, I can rebuild your whole fence. Like,
yeah.
what?
Mate, this day and age, fence, fucking nothing. Bread and butter.
So we meet Bill, and then do we first? No, we do, because sorry, that comes way later. But then so Bill's obviously set up all these traps around his property or just outside the fence and whatnot. And then one day, one of the alarms goes off or whatever it is, or it signals that someone's triggered one of the traps, and he goes out and there's a person in there, and he's saying, I'm not infected. And then he goes, are you armed? And I actually quite like this part. And he pauses for a few seconds, and he goes, no. And then Bill, sorry, personal mate of mine, Big Nick. But Bill goes, why'd you pause? And he goes, I was trying to think of a reason, but I couldn't think of one. I thought that was quite good, because in that moment it's like, do you say that you're armed but you're not really, just to. But then you're stuck in a hole, mate. So. But yeah, so then these two meet, and then what does Bill say? Like, I'm not going to give free lunches to a bunch of bums or something to that extent. He's like, I'll give you a free lunch, and then you go tell, and I'll have a bunch of bums come around for a free meal.
This isn't an Arby's. Is that what he says?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then he obviously convinced, Frank, somehow, he's like, Bill kind of softens and it's like, all right, I'll let you have one free meal. So then they go inside, and then obviously they cook him. What?
I'll let him have a shower, because he's a dirty bloke. There's
quite
quite a contrast in their skin.
Sorry. Yes, he did have a shower first. But
one dude's quite clean.
What did he cook him?
Oh, rabbit.
Rabbit. It was rabbit. Yeah, rabbit. And pours a nice glass of wine, and then, the bond begins. I think. James, would you like to take over?
No, you're fine. I just thought that was very, very charming.
But it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, they clearly start to bond, and it's interesting because in the official podcast, this is the unofficial one, but in the official one with Troy and whatnot, they kind of talk about how Frank picks up on Bill's. I can't remember the word they use, but like Frank just gets like a vibe from
there's a
Bill
lot of these camera nods to bits of detail in the environment. Subtle, not so subtle. For example, the less subtle one is the big old piano. So there's obviously, he's forming an idea of what this Bill character's like. He's like, this isn't a typical dude, bro. Yeah. This isn't a blokey bloke. He's clearly got an eye for taste.
Because I think he says, what does he say? Like, not what you expected, or not the vibe, but that you expected, or something like that. And he goes, nah, you are, or something to that effect. I wanted to talk about what they mentioned in the podcast, because I just want to get James's thoughts on this, but they talked about having the gay characters, and Craig, Mazin, it might have even been Neil as well, I can't remember, but they were saying how they wanted...
It was Mazin.
Yeah.
Did you want the quote?
Have you listened to it?
Yeah, I've got the transcript here if you want.
Yeah, go the transcript.
And by transcript means I wrote these notes listening to it. So Mazin said he wanted to bring in as many gay men into the process as possible for the episode, given it was about a story of middle-aged gay romance. In this case, we had an embarrassment of riches, he said, including editor Timothy Good, producer Cecil O'Connor, and especially director Peter Hoare. Mazin said Bartlett brought the producers to tears in the audition to play Frank, and then a few months later, White Lotus came out, and they're like, "Oh man, we did hit the jackpot here." So basically, just saying that they had a lot of gay middle-aged men around them in creative roles that they were saying that try and bounce off, because they were trying to get gay actors.
Yeah. So Murray Bartlett, they were saying he's a gay middle-aged married middle-aged man. And I don't remember the exact quote, but they're saying about one of them. This could be incorrect, but they're like, being gay is not the most important part, or not the like the
being gay wasn't the most important thing about this story. It was being a middle-aged man.
Yeah. And I don't recall what came after that, but do you have it in your transcript there?
I don't. Sorry.
That's right. But they kind of go on to talk about that, and they said that do you remember the actor? They said they wanted to. It was the guy that was Brukhanov in Chernobyl, or was that a different character that they wanted to play?
I think it was
Bill.
Yeah.
I don't remember his actual name, but the guy that plays, he's the director of the plant. He's the guy that I don't know if you remember him, but yeah. Anyway, he's the
vaguely, yeah.
Anyway, so they wanted him, but that he was busy or something like that. So they got Nick to come in and he did a pretty good role. But James, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, like, I'm definitely glad that they involved other queer people in the creative process here. I think that producer, director, actor isn't the same as writer on this particular front. I would have appreciated if maybe they'd brought in a queer writer to maybe help them massage some of this a little bit. At the same time, queer people aren't a monolith, right? And like, there are a lot of queer people who this story really works for, and I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I think there's room to tell this kind of this particular kind of romance. I guess. Like you described it before as like, he shows up and he makes him a meal, and like the connection kicks off, whatever it is. And like there's a tiny part of my brain that is like reminded of any time that I would go out with friends earlier in my life, and they would be like, well, there's another gay person here, surely you two are going to hit it off. I think that is a little that, maybe just a touch. I don't know.
In the show?
In the show, yeah. I think there's a little bit.
Well,
because the thing is, like, the thing that I praised in my review is that, and I couldn't get into this because of the spoiler situation, but like, the idea that this seems like Bill's first time with a dude is the vibe I'm getting from this, and I think that the actual intimacy of that scene of them together in bed is very true to life. Like, that felt very tender and very nice to me. The connection around that I do find a little bit more kind of like, what do these two have in common other than the fact that they're both gay and here? And if that is all it is, I don't even think that's necessarily a bad story to tell, but I do think that maybe more naturally leads to the ending that we get in the game, which is, definitely miles darker, and I fully understand why it's not for everybody. But I do think that there's a point to a lot of the brutality in The Last of Us in both games. I think that they know what they're saying generally with the choices that they're making. And I think specifically having Ellie meet a a really sort of like a gay couple who have effectively kind of like self-destructed their lives together at that point in her life while she's still growing and developing as a person. And then with what she goes on to do with her own queer relationship, I think that there is some thematic resonance there. There's some foreshadowing. There's some connective tissue. And what we get here instead is like a really, really nice love story. But if this was between straight people, I would have been bored out of my mind. And I kind of wonder how everyone else is. Like, if this was just a dude and a chick, like, I just do not see this episode getting this level of hype around it. And I yes, like, representation matters. Like, absolutely it does. There's no real invalid form of it either. Again, like I said at the top, very good if queer people enjoy this and queer people want to tell this story. I would never tread on any of that. But I just don't think it's particularly well written.
I'm glad you said it. Yeah, because I didn't want to be the first one to say, but what you just said very much reflected my experience with it. So if I could sort of leapfrog, if I could put it in so few words, it kind of felt like Baby's first queer A24 movie. Mm-hmm. Like this is as approachable as like, I'll tell you what I mean by this. So you can hedge your bets, or at least I can speak anecdotally for the fact that I work with a fairly masculine crowd of men of all different backgrounds. And for many of them, this is really their first deliberate attempt at keeping up on a weekly basis with a prestige show. And by the extent of that, this is also the first time that they've been caught off guard with a gay romance plot put front and center in their face. And they've just got to sit there and, feel whatever they have to feel. But you can't be too confronting with it. Like, for example, I've such a harsh yardstick to measure this with is the fact that, I've seen far more interesting and compelling queer romances in, I mean, the first film that came to mind for me was something like Moonlight. And that's a very harsh comparison to make, Nathan. But at the same time, that's a film that's definitely not afraid to present some, really complicated situations around queer romance, which for me, as a straight white man, was far more interesting. I was really on the edge of my seat with that film. With this, I kind of felt like, this is approachable. I'm glad that other folks are seeing this. I kind of feel like I've been here a little bit before. Like, this is past that sort of entry level. Like, this has definitely got some nice sanded edges to it. For what I would have expected a little bit more drama and messy drama, perhaps. So, this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier. I love the intent. I think it had a little bit more potential, and that would have been risky considering the major audience you've got for this show.
So when you say you want more drama, just so what's an example of that, so I can visualize what you're talking
What's
about?
one of the... Okay, so if we use an example here, some of the major points of conflict between these two, and remember, we're seeing them over, what is it, 15 years or so?
A while.
Like a while, right? And we get treated to... You would expect their denouement to be before they go grey, right? Because that's obviously a marked change point for that narrative. They go grey, which was another thing for me that, I don't know, kind of... It looked a little bit comical, the greyness of their hair. That's completely neither here nor there. But their biggest issues is, someone chucks a hiss... Like Bill chucks a hissy fit when Frank wants to socialise with other people. That's as uncomfortable as shit's getting for him, which, you kind of get it. It's a survivalist out of his comfort zone. But you're trying to build up like that's as hard as it gets. Or when the fact that Frank's, not really allowed to make his own mark in the city. He wants his boutique and that. And there's a little, obviously that's been a point of contention. And then you don't really get to see the final product, which again is neither here nor there. But those were the two markers of the complications in that relationship. And again, I'm saying if you've watched other or even read other queer romances, that's pretty bottom shelf in terms of relationship drama. And that's what I think. That's kind of what James means. Like, if that was two straight folks, that was their issues, and they're trying to tell an intimate story, that's a fucking snorefest.
I guess to piggyback off of that, like, I think when Nathan says drama, I think maybe what we're also looking for here is a bit of friction.
Correct. Thank you.
I don't want, because I think it's not an invalid impulse to be like, hey, I don't want to. What I'm looking for, like. give a boatload of tragedy to a queer couple that we're building up in this world, right?
But
I
it
think
is still a tragedy.
Exactly. Like, I think it's a little bit antithetical to the entire concept of The Last of Us. I think to specifically put two queer people in a bubble outside of that world is its own concern for me, just as a queer viewer who loves the world of The Last of Us. But yeah, like those fights that they have, the sort of blips that we do get of like their friction and whatnot, like those do feel like very fundamental issues. And I think that the story of two men who find each other, find intimacy, find love, but then eventually over time realize that the only reason they found that love is because they were the last two men on Earth. That's a much more compelling and interesting queer story to me than just what we get here, which is like, yeah, they fight, but ultimately they fall asleep in each other's arms, which is beautiful. Like, don't get me wrong, like it's very nice. It's all very nice. I don't disagree with it, but I'm reminded of the strawberry scene, right? Which is like, there's this kind of like thing where I think old mate trades one of Bill's guns for some strawberry seeds, and it's kind of like, oh, how dare you do that kind of crap. And then later on, they're exercising, and he's like, I got something to show you, and they find this like beautiful patch of strawberries, and they're leaning there, and they eat strawberries for the first time, and Nick Offerman does a really good job of doing like the kind of, this is the first time I've had fruit in 20 years or whatever. And like, it's a very sincere moment. At the same time though, the sun is like perfectly setting behind them. It's kind of like shaky.
It's an Emmy moment, man.
Exactly.
And there's a
like,
couple of them, and they just zoom in on his
Truly.
face, and you got to soak it in. But there's not much character to the shot, is there?
well, that's it. It's just, it's very textureless to me. Like it's a
Yeah.
very smoothed out version of this story.
You're gonna get an award, bro.
Well, that's it, you know, and like I don't go in on the whole like just because something is obviously trying to manipulate you means that it's bad. I think that a lot of media that we consume pushes our buttons very obviously, and we let it do that, right? It's that buying in of enjoying a story. I just couldn't buy into this particular one.
Okay.
But yeah, like I feel like if you don't have much exposure to this kind of story, then
Oh, totally.
yeah, my man.
Yeah, for the millions and millions and millions of viewers that are tuning into this, like this is probably a really good starting point for like, oh, I never even considered that queer people could fall in love.
Like, that's going to be such a reality for so many people, I suspect.
But is it hard? Is it hard to knock it down a peg for that? Not because it's not Moonlight or Call Me by Your Name.
No.
Crazy.
Absolutely not. That's why I'm saying this is just a mishmash of expectations. This is purely me. That's what I'm saying. Like I'm stoked for the folks that are enjoying this. I don't want to yuck their yum at all. You know, I think you're absolutely well entitled to really, really enjoy this to the point of tears. I'm grateful. I kind of wish I was there with you. You know, I would have liked to shed a few tears with this one. I didn't. And you know, that's an issue of expectation purely for me.
I feel like that's been a bit of a common theme. With
I think it has. So I think I'm still
expectation,
finding my feet with this series, and be interesting to see how I come out in episode 10. Is it 10? Do we have 10? 9.
9. Yeah.
But James, are you? What's the question I'm trying to ask? This is, even though you don't resonate fully with what their partnership and what they and how it is, are you glad they did this episode for a big budget?
Yes.
Big title game like this, or
No, totally.
brand.
I think it deserves to exist. I'm glad it exists. If even just for Nathan's point of like his straight mates have to now watch this and just sort of sit with whatever that makes them feel. I think that anything that does that and pushes more queer stories into a more mainstream audience is A-okay in my book. Like, you know, like I've come on this podcast sort of every week on this show getting progressively more disillusioned with it. But at the same time, I still stand by my 7. Like, I think that like it is, I'm not mad this thing exists. I'm just, you know, I don't think it's an expectations problem with me because like I don't come into this being like it needs to be a certain thing. I think I just wanted a little bit more from it at every turn that it's made. And we've spent the last couple of weeks talking about how this is very like standard zombie fodder television. I think this is just standard love story television, but it just happens to be starring 2 gay men. And that's really good on its own right. And in some circles, it's revolutionary, but not to me.
Yeah, I'm starting to get a bit of a like AAA Ubisoft vibe from this. Like it's checking all the boxes. Because Ubisoft games do check all the boxes. But also there's that little bit of potential there that you're like, if they just
It's just missing the edge. Like there's
there's so many sanded edges, isn't it? It's very approachable. And we talked last week, I think, about breadcrumbs in terms of the visual storytelling. This episode is littered with it. You don't miss a beat because the camera doesn't want you to, which kind of threw me a little bit. Like it's more obvious than it pretends to be, which is not going to be a fault for many people, and that's great. You know,
you got any thoughts on what we're just talking about?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, the whole like walk before you can run, and this is going to be confronting for a lot of people. So, because it's basic doesn't inherently make that bad. I not to validate what you two are saying. Like, it's definitely, it's not changing the world, right? It's not breaking it down, but I guess it's the other stuff that I liked out of it. The whole kind of Bill coming to terms with his identity, and not just as a gay man, but also kind of everything he's done in his life has been hoard the resources. This very moment, don't waste any of that. And he kind of lets go of a little bit of that across the episode, I see. And then kind of that happened with Frank, kind of, live a little, kind of influencing each other a little bit in those moments. And I really like that with the kind of how that plays out in the note at the end, and how they kind of, have that, it's tragic, but it's not kind of brutally tragic, maimed type thing. They got to kind of go out on their own terms, and yeah, it probably wouldn't have worked as good if it was a straight couple. But just the suicide, like just the note at the end and what kind of Bill says in that note, and how that kind of comes full circle back to Joel reading it, and how it's left for Joel and kind of the relationships that he's had in his life. I was like, oh man, that's the moment that hit me hard. I'm like, okay, we're getting all this context. This is great for maybe the people that have played the game. What does it mean for people that haven't played the game? How do you link that back thematically? It's like Joel's had Sarah in his life. He couldn't save her. Tess couldn't save her. And then another person that he's kind of adjacent to, but not really close to, but someone that almost says that, Joel, you're like me, or Bill, you're like me. They're kind of like the same person. This is why I'm going to leave you everything, even though we have this back and forth conversation. It's not that Joel couldn't save him, but it's almost like the parallels of like Bill couldn't save Frank, and that was his one purpose, but he came to grips with that and kind of letting that, I lived and I went on my own terms, embrace love. And then that message to Joel was like, also embrace love, save Tess, go all in on that. And that's kind of like Joel has that realization of like, is it me, or does just death follow me? Am I cursed? Well, not cursed, that's probably the bad word, but is it me that has a failing that this happens to, or is it just, this is just around me and has nothing to do with me, but I'm going to always have these moments around me? And that's when he comes in and lays down the laws to kind of Ellie. And almost like I said at the start, kind of feels that responsibility more so than ever before. Not just because, she had that start at the point at the start of the episode where it's like, she almost feels guilty. Like, I didn't ask you to save me, dismissive the whole thing. It's not your fault. You wanted to get the battery. Like, Tess wasn't my fault. She already feels that guilt. And now Joel's kind of come full circle of like, okay, well, I'm no longer doing this kind of for Tess. It's almost like, I don't really have feelings for Ellie, but as a bond or relationship, that's going to come. But it's almost like, am I going to keep trying instead of just giving up? Like, I could just kind of forget about her right now if I wanted to, the end game. But do I keep going when I know that everything around me always falls apart? Like, that was kind of like, I guess, the big through line of the episode. Maybe we get there if it is a straight relationship or not. Potentially not. We've seen the game. We already have investment in these characters. That's why seeing it all fleshed out and all that nuance, whether it's like basic or not, that's kind of, I guess, the whole reason we're seeing this like time capsule episode and why it's bookended that way. But I guess that's why it kind of left me a little bit at the end, and like kind of Joel walking out and then coming back and like, all right, everything is happening still for these characters and their bond, and I'm hoping that is the way as the series progresses. But as it does in the game, you get closer to them and everything's happening around that. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
See, I thought Joel and Bill share very, very similar traits. Like they see themselves as the protector.
Well, you see that when he goes off with Tess, right? Like, yeah. Tess goes off with Frank, and they're having the lunch, and then they stay behind, and they kind of line each other off.
That's it.
Yeah.
Put that gun away.
Let's do the trades.
I can fix your fence, mate. No,
I
I
actually
just
love that
think-
line from Joel about the fence. He's like, we can trade. I can get you the 10 feet of high tensile aluminium. It'll protect you for the rest of your life. And he has that like pause, and he's like, lives. And it's almost like Joel kind of sees himself in Bill. It's like, okay, I know your one goal is now to protect Bill, like to protect Frank. That's why you live. And I had that, and I know the power of like almost manipulating that or using that in a sense. Sorry.
That's right. So I want to jump back a little bit to the piano scene. And how did you feel about the piano scene? So the interesting thing that I learned from the actual podcast is that apparently Murray Bartlett's an amazing singer, and he had to like act like a shit version of the song.
Yeah, he's a theatre kid.
But there's
very talented man.
I don't remember the actual, because this is kind of when I was tuning in and out, but they were talking about how they chose the song for that moment, which is quite interesting. I know that Mazen, I think, just texted one of his mates. There's more to it than that, but yeah, it's interesting. I actually didn't find that episode too bad. Troy Baker didn't seem to talk a lot, so it was kind of good. But just to kind of sidestep a little bit, it did feel a little bit manufactured. Like, just, hey, like this scene was really cool. Like, it kind of didn't feel, you know what I mean? Like it was all prepped kind of thing, which I'm sure it probably is. But anyway, so then we have the song, and then they have the intimate moment. I'm trying to think, and then we fast forward a little bit through then. But I did love the line that Frank says. He goes, "I'm not just doing this for a free lunch," or whatever it was. Like, I'm staying here for another couple of days, kind of thing. I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah,
and then
I don't sleep with anyone for lunch or whatever. It is.
yeah. Yeah, and then we move forward, and then I think the strawberries, or is the strawberries? Have they met Joel and Tess yet?
Yeah, because I think he trades the.
Oh yes, sorry, yes, that is correct. Yes,
yeah,
correct.
I'm pretty sure anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, so the first time they meet, you can tell that Bill's not a fan, kind of thing. But then I think there's just a respect between those two, or at least on Bill's side.
Yes. Do you think that this tracks with it was in episode 2, I think, when Tess says to Ellie, like, we're bad people, we do bad things. And then when I was watching them have that lunch together, I was like, it would be really interesting if we watched Tess and Joel fuck these two over somehow. And then it just didn't happen. And I just kind of wonder, I guess what we're essentially doing on this podcast is like James checking in every week to be like, how are they softening Joel's image for the audience this week?
Didn't they this week?
Sorry?
They so did this week though. Like I saw it no more so than I had this week.
Yes, and like it ends with what is it? Tommy leaves that note. That's why that's why men like you and me are here. We have a job to do, and God help any motherfuckers who stand in our way. And because of the entire preceding narrative, this is framed as a good thing, and I'm very, very concerned about a lot of this characterization because I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. And that lunch scene reminded me of Tess and Joel's continued, well, we're bad guys, but all you've seen us do is good things characterization.
Do we know what was Joel and Tess getting out of the deal, or the partnership?
Just supplies and shit, right?
Yeah.
Like just nebulous apocalypse needs.
Yeah. Just another supply route.
Yeah.
So then I think the next major part of that is the break-in, or the attempted break-in of the Raiders or whatever they are. And Bill gets
pretty fucked
shot.
up.
Yeah, Bill gets shot.
Yeah.
Because Murray's in bed. The alarm goes off. Murray's in bed. Yeah, and old mate's already out there somewhere, or he's must be down in the bunker getting ready. And that's I think in that scene he does say call Joel or find Joel or something like that. Is that
Correct.
Yeah.
And then it skips because then it skips well fast forward. And I think then they're graying Bill. Frank's in the wheelchair.
Yes.
Yes, from a undisclosed illness.
Well, they talk about this on the podcast if you had to guess what it was, you know what you think it would be?
I have an uncharitable guess, but feel free to just tell me anyway.
Prostate cancer?
No.
That wasn't me trying to suggest anything by that. Just yeah.
Yeah.
No, just
I get what you're saying. I personally didn't take it that way, so I think you're fine.
It was either MLS. No, is that what it's called? MLS? Or am I thinking of
MS.
MS? Sorry,
MS?
not MLS. And then ALS is what they say. Sorry.
Yeah, or early onset of ALS.
So they go. It's
Which is what I kind of guessed when we were watching it. Like Kim leaned over. It's like, is that, you reckon that's MS? Like,
I thought it
think
was
so.
MS.
Like,
Yeah,
what else could it be?
That's where I went. Yeah, which is it's quite sad. And then Frank's obviously had enough, and he's like, "Nah, I'm done. Like this is it. Like this is my last day." And because you see that Bill's obviously helping him get into bed, do all that sort of stuff. And one morning he's just there, and he's like, "Nah, this is it. This is the last day." And at some point, Bill is convinced that it's going to be his last day. Yeah,
A choice I really like, actually. I especially think that the reveal that like there were already pills in the wine. I really liked that as a story beat for those two characters.
I did not expect it. Did you?
Really? Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I saw it coming a mile off, but I still really
right.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
No, when they were.
I thought they followed through well.
I think that's more because I was sort of expecting a similar take to the game. In the sense
right.
that, the Bill.
Yeah, you're going to see Ellie and Old Mate
Yes, yeah.
interact and yeah.
Bit of Bill.
But yeah, but no, I liked that choice as well, even though they both perish.
Yeah, but I mean, like they get to die on their own terms,
Yeah.
right? Which is simultaneously something very novel for the world of The Last of Us, and also as a means of sort of like counteracting the bury your gaze kind of stuff
Yeah.
that we usually get with queer characters. I think that having them survive this long and getting to go out on their own terms is obviously quite pointed. It's very much a choice that they've made here. Yeah.
I don't know why, but I got a little bit of a chuckle just thinking about Bill or Nick when then in the letter they write, "I've left the window open, so hopefully the house doesn't stink."
Yeah, I enjoyed that too. I thought that was a nice bit of characterization.
I thought that was quite good.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and then Joel rocks up. He knows the PIN code, gets in, and then obviously they're dead. They find the note. Or no, Ellie finds the note first, and then Joel goes out, and it's obviously hits him pretty hard because I think there is mention of Tess. Look after Tess or save Tess or whatever the
It's
wording
in
is.
the letter. Yeah.
And that's when they go get the car, and they get all of the supplies that they can. I did find they bring this up in the actual podcast, and I did think this at the time too. I still find it a little bit weird that they didn't let Ellie take a gun at this point, given they had fucking heaps of them in the bunker.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
If it makes any difference, it's not till like well after this that she gets a gun in the game.
really,
I was surprised how late she gets a gun.
yeah, right.
Well, she's still a child at that point. So.
Well, yeah, because there's
She doesn't have a gun until like
It's America.
I think it's
She
like
should have a
halfway
gun by now.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's like halfway till they're through like Pittsburgh or something. So I'm thinking around the time they discover that the Fireflies research camp thing in the university's been moved on.
I'm trying
It's somewhere around that point that she gets a gun.
But doesn't she? Does she sneakily take one from somewhere, or does she?
Yeah. She saves him with a gunshot at one
house.
point, but he takes it right off. Where he's like, "Naughty girl, but thank you for saving me. You ain't touched
Naughty
another
girl.
one for a while."
No, I don't.
Well, that's effectively.
I'm just trying to think where she got it in the game. I can't recall. Or do you even see? You must do.
You do. I'm just trying to. I'm
Anyway,
just struggling to place it. Yeah, it's a moment.
Yeah, right.
And the gameplay significantly changes at that point. At least, it's not just you firing at enemies like you have been for the past 4 hours.
Yeah. So obviously, this part of the story is, this part of the game is very different because in the game they go to the school, I believe, and they go to try and find a battery, and that's when they find, or they're going through the suburb,
Superb.
and they come across Frank, who's hung himself, and the letter that Frank has written basically implies that he was going to escape with the battery, or he took the battery. And I think this is where in the game, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's implied that they're together. Or do we get little hints before that?
You find his suicide note, and the suicide note is very much like, "Fuck you, I've grown to hate you
I
over
always
time."
hated you. Like it wasn't I'll be honest, having played it so recently, I went into that episode not expecting a queer romance whatsoever. Despite the conversation that's been occurring from the day it aired, because there was no sense of that. I got nothing but disdain was the impression I got from both the words spoken and words written in the game. Like it was purely a meeting of survival convenience. They had a social connection at best, and even then they got on each other's, grind each other down effectively.
But
Grind each other down.
But that is the moment though that where the player learns of the
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, then there's that moment later, which like the Ellie finding the porn magazine.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
well, how do we feel about that scene in the movie? Sorry, in the episode.
I think it works in the game because it's a moment of levity for those two characters, and paired with sort of the subtle storytelling that's going on around their relationship with Bill and Frank. You kind of like look back on that like dynamic now. I've been like, oh shit, yeah, gay maybe. And I think in this, it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's like somebody said before, like you've got two things sandwiched on the other side of this one thing in the middle, and I don't know. I don't think it fully gels.
Yeah,
I'm glad we agree.
I don't think it fit Bill's personality in the
There is that
episode.
too.
Yeah, like I didn't feel like he'd be the kind of guy that would stash a porno in the back of his truck. You know what I mean? Like take a quick trip around the corner.
Well, and that's it. Like, it's a bit of environmental storytelling about a couple who aren't really fucking anymore, right? Like, this dude's having to sneak off to his truck to sort of like get his jollies off and whatnot. What a fucking terrible term. I'm so sorry I said that.
I love that. I love that term, actually. Big fan.
Yeah, sure you do. But
That
yeah,
gets
I
my
know, to me it
jollies off.
paints a different picture to this one here. Yeah.
But that kind of like what you said before, James, about how in the game, even though we don't get a lot of it, and we only get those little beats, like out of that relationship being out of necessity, not actually being gay, and how that might be a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, which is not true love, right? Like the idea of like, you're going to stumble upon somebody else in the apocalypse who just happens to be like your one person, especially when they have such stark differences as these two characters seem to have. Even ideologically speaking, the amount of hoarding that Bill does here, I just can't imagine this Frank being okay with that.
That's what I meant by like mid chapter conflict. Like I thought they would be butting heads over a little bit more. Like I'm not saying, when I suggested like tragedy and conflict, I didn't mean like one is attempting to kill the other. I just mean there's definitely more flesh here than we're seeing. I wanted to be teased a little more. Like, what's their issues? What's going on? Who keeps stealing the toothbrush?
Can you remind me, Nathan, because you're playing it, didn't Ellie steal a comic from Bill in the game?
She did indeed. Yep. She basically, as soon as she throws the porno mag out the window of the car, which is basically how you found out about it, as I said, in the back of the truck, then she basically just whips that out straight after and says, "Ha! I stole that from Bill as well."
That didn't happen in the show, did it?
I want to say no, or at least it didn't leave an impression.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I find that a little bit weird because obviously
She saw the arcade machine before.
Ellie's love for comics is obviously quite big across the games, and they didn't even.
Well, they're collectible.
Hey.
Oh, yeah, they are too. I found that a very weird omission, like something that's so small that you could just.
What comes up? Well,
It's different, isn't it? I think it's different, isn't it? Are you thinking volume
of where we're going. Yeah.
This is why it helps so much to I'm just reframing myself every week. These are different characters. They're doing different things with them. and just the sooner I accepted that.
Ellie's still very similar. Like she talks about, you can see that she's got. Actually, I don't know if that's a spoiler or not. Maybe I won't say that. But there are things that Ellie's quite into, and that it's quite you can tell that they've. I don't want to say taken that from the game, but Ellie from the game is Ellie from the show here, with some of her
Ellie from the block,
her interests. So, I don't know. It just felt like it was such a, like, why instead of a porno mag, why couldn't it have been a comic book?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
One last thing I did quite like, and I don't know if is the music, Joel, and the music in this episode at the end of the music, where they find the tapes. Is that?
Oh, yeah, like that iconic piece of music.
I just liked that moment. I can't remember it exactly, but I remember that I liked it. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
All right, and then we finished the episode. 10 out of 10 to most people.
That's it, mate.
I don't, I understand why some people are suggesting that.
It's fun.
I don't get. Honestly, I love the
man.
episode, and like I said, once again, the through line, like the bookend, so thematically how it fits for me, and based on the previous episodes and the relationship Joel's had in his past, and linking all that together, I really like. Maybe I'm looking too much into that and whatever, but I don't. Yeah, all the kind of the Emmy praise and all that stuff, and being like awards bait and all that kind of stuff. They were great performances. Don't get me wrong, and like best TV, like bit TV episode of all time. It's I don't vibe with that, because I've seen some, as long as Ozymandias is out there in the Breaking Bad world, like I can't say that honestly. Yeah.
Obviously,
and some of the Barry episodes.
Yeah,
two of them in particular.
Again, that's where I was coming from, that sort of high standard. But I mean, I feel like Nick Offerman, he was Emmy nominated for Devs, and this role, I feel like what he puts into this role is everything, or rather as good as what he gave for Devs. So it definitely doesn't hurt that the shots that have him at his most emotionally vulnerable are very, very squarely up in on that face. That helps.
Good face.
Yeah, he's always had a good face.
Yeah.
Just on what you were saying, buddy, I found that talk about best TV episode ever shit. I was like, wow.
Oh, sorry. Is that what you meant, buddy? Yeah. Oh, absolutely not. No, Ozymandias blows that out of the water.
No,
I'm just like, I'm happy everyone loved it and everyone excited about it, but it's probably just like the small kind of portion of what I see on social media and stuff, and everyone around me is also loving it as well. It's just I guess when you're in that kind of space, you see the extremes of it.
I didn't realize that was the conversation.
Extreme highs and the extreme kind of lows. I got to say, for such a
hot damn,
air quotations, controversial episode, I guess it's just my kind of portion of the internet I am in, and every now and then the bad portion seeps in with its pretty bad videos and bad people. I think I've seen like hardly any of that here. So I was like expecting a lot more backlash, but I feel like I've seen a lot more backlash about there being backlash than what there is. But it's maybe just the circles that I kind of run in. Everybody's kind of celebrated it and enjoyed it. Maybe to a portion of being a bit,
yeah, my algorithm's very much been that. I certainly haven't seen anything.
I'm surrounded by nice people. It's good.
Yeah, we've done well.
Oh man, that's great.
All right, before I drop this into the thing, I got a question for you. You may not be able to answer. Maybe you can. Which Bill arc did you prefer? TV show Bill arc or game Bill arc?
Oh, TV show Bill arc for me. Only because it was a lot more fleshed out and therefore interesting. Yeah, I was along for that ride.
Knowing full well that you probably can't do both. Like you can't. Neil was sort of saying that you couldn't do a story like this in a game.
Yeah, he's got that quote here about how it doesn't work in the game, but I'm kind of like, yeah, it's definitely great and seeing it in this, but I'm kind of almost watching it and seeing it as complimentary. Like, oh my God, that's giving like a lot more context or backstory. Sure. It's kind of adding that element. It's hard to split it for me at the moment because I'm like, okay, well, the game can't tell these stories or wouldn't be able to tell these stories in the same way as what you would because of the, you know, the gameplay, cutscenes, all that kind of stuff. And then everything in here, like, oh, well, they've got the kind of platform to do it. Yeah, like that's what you said before, Nathan, about like, you know, these are two different things. Sooner I've kind of clicked into that, the more I can enjoy the both elements. But yeah, obviously he's awesome because he's got, you know, they're both awesome in this because they get the time to shine, right, and have more material.
Good. Yeah.
Solid. Very solid. So yeah, what I just put in the chat there is what's kind of been going around. So internet's going wild, mate.
You getting the bad shit?
All right, let's wrap it up.
Oh no, okay. People are hyped.
People are very hyped.
Yeah, and before we wrap, I guess it just got renewed for season 2. So.
Oh yes. How do we?
Yes.
Buddy, how do you feel about that?
Do they have it in them to get to the twisted, dark place that some of these characters get to by the end of season 2?
You said it, buddy.
Because a lot of the reasons people hated number 2, outside of me just being like straight up bigots and you know, terrible people that the absolute cesspool of the internet and humanity in general. Yeah, it takes risks and it tells a story in ways that it didn't in the first, like being completely linear and having two sides of a story and things being more grey than black and white, and having almost your heroes have, or heroes in quotations, do questionable things that make you question their actions and kind of the whole effect of the world. I don't like, can they get to that point? Because it would be criminal if they just, you know, carried on almost what you're saying at the moment, James, where like, oh look, Joel in a good light. Like, I'm hoping that, you know, there's a little bit more subtlety under there, and hopefully by the end of the season we get, you know, a little bit more, is, you know, Joel bad or good? I can't say that right now, but they have to, right? If they're going to do season 2, are we just going to be stock standard? It turns into normal TV, and we're going to get, you know, 4 or 5 seasons to this, and all of a sudden, you know, Dexter Morgan has a baby and has a life, and is not this meticulous serial killer, and we're questioning his like motives and stuff, and becomes a TV sitcom drama. Or do we get the more nuanced take in the game too? So I'm kind of apprehensive, but I'm interested. I'm intrigued. I want to see where it goes because it could be great. It could not be great, but so I'm here for it.
I'll quickly butt in. So I wanted to actually get your thoughts. So we've actually discussed this on the podcast a few times, our feelings on The Last of Us Part 2. And I think both James and I have said this is a game that leaves you quite emotionally exhausted. Like it kicks like a mule, and it makes you uncomfortable. It's not afraid to, and it's mostly, I'd say for me it was very effective in making me uncomfortable. I felt like so far The Last of Us hasn't wanted to make me feel any more uncomfortable than I would watching a zombie film. Is that kind of like, how did it sit with you when you played the game? Like, in terms of, because you're like, will they have the ability to go to those dark places? Just how uncomfortable did the game actually make you?
Well, I took 4 days off work, and in my job, you know, being there for the launch of a massive game is pretty important. So that's how much that series means to me. And on the first day and the first morning when I went to work, come back home, I play the game for the first 2 or 3 hours, and I have to stop. I have to stop playing. And then I didn't play for the rest of the day until the next morning. And I'm kind of like, it hit me hard. And then I'm talking, like messaging to friends who are playing it, like, what the fuck? What the hell is this happening? And you thought that was going to be the big holy shit, what the hell moment. And then it just happens. It's these characters that you love just like deteriorate, and just revenge, and at all costs, to the point of like self-harm, and what's good, what's bad, who are the good guys. Like, it was breaking me. Like, towards the end of the game, in the finale, I'm like, I don't want to press any of these buttons right now. Yeah. I don't want to finish these actions. This is harmful. And to see like lose everything and only just have memories. It messed me up. It was like, it was great. It was kind of like you watch The Godfather Part 1 and then you watch The Godfather Part 2, and The Godfather Part 2 is just this absolute fuckery. Like, that's kind of
just blows the door off the hinges, right?
Blows like the door off the hinges, and it's like, you know, that was The Empire Strikes Back Part 2, and it's like, turned up to 11. So yeah, that's kind of the parallels. Godfather 1, Godfather 2. Yeah.
Now
But what they should do, they should definitely remaster this game, and they should definitely sell it for $70 US and $125 here.
You know what? I mean, yeah, I've been peeled. Too good. I'll do it.
Buddy, all the fish are asleep at night, so...
They're not biting.
Yes. I also just want to say, like, I know we sort of made a joke about it at the top of the episode, and like, I didn't cry during this episode, but I fucking sobbed at The Last of Us Part 2. So like, you know, I'm capable of feeling the things that they need. I just, to echo some of what was just said, the idea of a Sanded Edges Part 2 makes me very nervous, both from a storytelling point of view, but also from the idea of like fixing fan response to that game makes me incredibly fucking anxious.
Yeah.
Yes.
No
Thanks,
Snyder
James.
cut.
I'm curious to see what they adapt from the game and then into the show. Like, what are they gonna, like, you know, seeing what they've changed here, like, what are they gonna do with Part 2 kind of thing. And James,
especially considering the audience that you've handheld into this, like, are they going to be ready for that shit?
one of the things, James, that you might have asked, I'm pretty sure Bella Ramsey confirmed she's coming back.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, interesting. We'll see how that goes.
I think
you can do a lot with makeup and lighting, and you know, Bella's obviously playing this as a slightly younger character as well. So like, there's a lot of different things that could go into this. I just hope that, I hope they can pull it off, because like Ellie in Part 2 is like all-time video game protagonist for me. Like, super fucking gay, super fucking self-destructive, a total mess of a human being. Love her.
Very nice. Buddy, sorry, you did say that you listened to the official podcast, yeah?
Yep.
What did you think of the window idea? I'm going to ask Buddy before I let you know what the window idea is.
I liked it. It's a good nod. They never really say or explicitly show what the window is in the Last of Us games. I think they do towards the end of 2, and it has like a little bit more emotional resonance because of the events of the game where they are. It's almost in this like epilogue of the story and kind of the world that it is now post everything. So it has a lot of effects there because of certain props and things around it that give you a more heartfelt reason. But if they were just going to do a little nod to that, then yeah, that's fine.
So the idea is, sorry to butt in, but the idea that they were talking about that they wanted to do is that this show would start up.
Yes.
Do you think I was talking about something different?
No.
All right.
No, I heard this. Yeah, I know where you're going.
Yeah, so the idea was that before each episode, or the episode would load up, right, and you'd have a window based on that episode, and it would just play, and then in the bottom right corner, or whatever it might be, right, it would have play episode or start episode, like, yeah, so they'd have this menu screen almost, like in the game with the...
Yeah, when the credits, instead of skip intro, it's like start episode.
Yeah, and it's just like a window from, a scene in that episode. But obviously they canned it because they were like, cool idea, but like didn't really pan out the way we wanted it to.
Yeah, I don't know. The Part 2's ending is very special to me, and I don't like it being an Easter egg for this story, but that's fine. That's fine.
Well, I don't think it was. It wasn't the ending. It was just the menu screen when you first opened the game.
I was reading an interview with the director. He got asked about it or something, and apparently, it was like allusions to like the menu screen, but also the last shot of The Last of Us Part 2 is like a window, like it which is itself referencing the menu shot of the first game.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah,
I didn't think that far into it.
Yeah, no, I mean,
it was more surface level. This is the main menu.
Yeah,
or front facing menu.
Because they didn't mention that in the thing. Anyway, cool. All right, thank you for listening to this week's wrap of The Last of Us episode 3. We will see you next week for episode 4. Let us know your thoughts on anywhere. just say them out loud and we'll hear them. Or you can get
Yell
in
them out
contact
your
with us
window
on-
right now.
That's it. Or jump on the socials and we'll love you forever. Thank you and
And farewell.
farewell.
Yep.
Bye.